It was supposed to be a quiet evening, a simple dinner at a local restaurant, just Emily and me. We hadn't done this in months, and I thought it would be nice to reconnect. But as we sat across from each other at the dimly lit table, something
felt off. I couldn't place it at first, but I noticed the subtle way Emily was avoiding eye contact. Her dark, wavy hair cascaded over her shoulders, her green eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite read.
She seemed distant, as though her mind was somewhere else entirely. I tried to ignore the growing unease in my chest, telling myself it was just a passing mood. Emily had always been the life of the party, charming everyone around her with her wit and beauty, but tonight she was different. She was quieter, more withdrawn. The conversation was strained, full of awkward pauses. I asked her how her day went, and she gave me the standard answer. "Fine," she said, absent-mindedly stirring her wine glass. "Is everything okay, Em?" I asked, watching her carefully. "You seem distracted." Her eyes met mine, but instead of the usual warmth, they were cold. She set her glass down and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. I could feel the tension building, but I had no idea what was coming next. "John?" she started, her voice oddly calm. "There's something I need to tell you." I felt my heart skip a beat, my mind racing. Was this about work or something more serious? I had no clue, but nothing could have prepared me for what she said.
"Next, I'm in love with someone else," she stated matter-of-factly, her green eyes locking onto mine without a trace of hesitation. The world seemed to pause.
My stomach twisted, and I could feel the blood drain from my face. "What?" I managed to choke out, barely able to comprehend the words she had just spoken. Her lips curved into a small, almost emotionless smile, and she continued, as though she were discussing a minor inconvenience rather than shattering my world. "I've been seeing Mark," she said, her voice still eerily calm. "You know Mark, my boss. We've been having an affair for months now." The words hit me like a freight train. I stared at her, unable to process what she was saying.
Emily, my wife, the woman I'd trusted with everything? She was having an affair with Mark, of all people? I had always believed our marriage was strong, that we were a team. But now, sitting across from me, Emily was casually confessing to
tearing everything apart. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but it was quickly replaced by a numbing disbelief. "You've been seeing him behind my back?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded. "Yes, John, I've decided I want to be with him. I'm leaving you." I blinked, trying to make sense of it. She said it like it was the simplest thing in the world, like she was ordering a drink at the bar. There was no trace of guilt, no sign of regret. Emily, my Emily, was telling me she was in love with another man. And that was it. She was done with our marriage. I looked around the restaurant, as if hoping someone would step in and tell me this was all a joke. But no one did. The world felt suffocatingly real, and in that moment I realized how utterly powerless I was. I had been blindsided. Emily's words hung in the air like poison, each syllable digging deeper into my chest. "You're just leaving?" I asked, my voice shaking now. My mind was reeling. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead,
all I could do was stare at the woman who had once been my everything.
"I've already made up my mind," she replied, the coldness in her tone unmistakable. "I don't want to live a lie anymore. I'm sorry, John, but this is what's best for me." Best for her? My mind couldn't comprehend how she could justify destroying everything we had. Our life together, the love we had built, it all meant nothing to her. It was as if our marriage had never been real. I wanted to shout, to lash out, but I couldn't find the words. All I could feel was the crushing weight of betrayal. I had trusted her with my heart, and she had shredded it without a second thought. "Is this how it ends?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "You just leave me for him."
And that's it? Emily didn't flinch. Yes, John, she said, her gaze unflinching. I'm done.
I could feel my chest tightening, a lump in my throat threatening to choke me. I had never imagined this moment. Emily, the woman I had loved and cared for, was standing there, telling me that she had chosen someone else, someone who wasn't me. As she stood up to leave, she looked at me one last time, her face emotionless. "Goodbye, John," she said. "I hope you understand." I watched her walk away, the sound of her heels clicking on the floor, echoing in my ears. I was left sitting there, alone, in shock. The restaurant seemed distant, as though I was no longer part of the world around me. I had been betrayed by the one person I trusted the most. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Something inside me shifted. A rage I hadn't known existed began to stir. Emily might have been walking out of my life, but she hadn't seen the storm coming, and neither had Mark. This was far from over. After Emily left that night, the silence in the house was deafening. The place that once felt like home, where I'd felt secure and loved, now felt like a prison. I sat in the dim glow of the kitchen light, staring at the half-empty bottle of wine we'd shared, wondering how I could have been so blind. For hours, I replayed the dinner in my head, trying to make sense of the cold way she delivered the news. There had been no tears, no hesitation, just a matter-of-fact announcement that shattered everything I thought I knew about our life together. I had trusted her. Emily had been my rock, my partner. I thought we were happy. But now, I felt nothing but a growing emptiness in my chest, a void that seemed impossible to fill. The woman I had given my heart to had casually discarded me without a second thought. She had walked out, leaving me alone with my thoughts, and now I had to figure out what to do with the mess she'd left behind. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I paced around the house, trying to make sense of it all, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like this, without even a hint of remorse? I had been faithful. I had trusted her completely, believing we were building something real together. But all of that had been a lie. As the days passed, I couldn't escape the thoughts of her affair with Mark, the man who had wormed his way into her life, into her heart. I couldn't believe it. Mark. He was always so charming, so smooth, the kind of guy who would say the right things and smile that perfect smile. I had never suspected anything. How could I have been so blind? Was I really that oblivious? Or had Emily been this distant all along? I thought back to the last few months, searching for any signs I might have missed. Emily had become more withdrawn, more focused on work, more distant in our conversations. She had stopped making time for me, for us, but I had been so wrapped up in my own routine that I hadn't noticed the slow unraveling of our marriage. I had brushed off her coldness, assuming it was just stress or a phase. I couldn't bring myself to believe she was capable of this kind of betrayal, but now everything was clear. I wasn't going to let her just walk away without facing the consequences of her actions, and neither was I going to let Mark get away with it. I wasn't the kind of man who would sit idly by while my world crumbled. No, I had to do something. I had to make her feel what I was feeling, make her understand the devastation she had caused. At first, I wasn't sure how to approach it. I had no plan, no idea where to start. But then, as I lay awake in the dark, a thought struck me. If Emily thought she could just leave me for Mark without a second glance, then I was going to make her regret it. I wasn't going to beg for her back, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I began to do some digging. At work, I asked around about Mark. I didn't want to make it obvious, but I needed information. What kind of man was he really? What was his reputation? What did people say about him when they didn't know I was listening? Slowly but surely, I started to piece together a picture of him. He was everything I had expected, charming, successful, and apparently well-liked by everyone around him. But there was something about him, something that didn't sit right with me. He was a man who prided himself on his success, but I could sense a certain fragility beneath the surface, a man who was always trying to prove something. And that's when the idea began to take shape. I wasn't going to confront Emily directly, not yet. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. But Mark, I could get to him. I could take away the one thing he seemed to care about: his reputation. I knew the office politics better than most. I had worked there long enough to understand how the game was played. Mark might have been Emily's boss, but I was no stranger to the inner workings of the company. I began to quietly gather intel, small things at first. A rumor here, a whispered conversation there. I started to make a few calls, dropping hints, planting seeds of doubt. Nothing major at first, just enough to make people question Mark's integrity, enough to make him sweat. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much power I had. The more I planned, the more I could feel my old self slipping away. I wasn't the man who had been betrayed anymore. I was something different, someone who wasn't afraid to do whatever it took to get even. I wasn't just going to make Emily regret her decision. I was going to make Mark pay too. The deeper I got into this plan, the more I began to feel a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time since the night Emily left, I felt in control. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't a victim. I was taking matters into my own hands, and I would make both of them regret their choices. But as the days wore on, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this wasn't just about revenge. It was something darker, something deeper. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who was driven by rage and hurt. I was no longer just John, the betrayed husband. I was John, the man who would destroy everything in his path to get back what was taken from him, and I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. It's strange how quickly things can spiral. A week ago, I was just John, ordinary, trusting, naive. Now, I was someone else. I could feel it in my every move, the way I walked into work with my head held a little higher, the way I spoke to people with a quiet confidence. It was as if I had become a different person entirely, someone who wasn't afraid to take control of his destiny. And the first step of my new life was clear. I needed to get to Mark. It wasn't just about ruining him. No, it was more than that. I had to make sure he understood the cost of betraying me. I had to expose him, tear down his perfect facade. Mark had gotten away with everything for far too long. He was the charming, smooth-talking boss who everyone adored, but I had seen through him. He wasn't as perfect as he appeared. And now I was going to make sure everyone else saw him for who he really was. I started small. I knew Mark's weaknesses, his need for approval, his obsession with his reputation. Everyone had their little cracks, and it didn't take long to figure out where his were. I began working behind the scenes, dropping subtle hints to colleagues about Mark's overbearing nature, his tendency to take credit for other people's work. I whispered rumors about his questionable business practices, things I knew would make people second-guess his integrity. No one could put their finger on it, but slowly, whispers began to spread. Mark was smart, but he wasn't untouchable, as much as he tried to maintain control, the subtle seeds I planted started to sprout. People began to question his actions, his decisions, and that was all it took. The more uncertainty I sowed, the more his world began to crack. I didn't want to destroy him outright, not yet. I wanted him to suffer, to feel the pressure of doubt and suspicion inching closer every day. I couldn't keep this up forever. Eventually, I would have to confront him directly. But for now, I watched from the shadows, taking pleasure in the discomfort I had caused him. The more he faltered, the more I felt empowered. I wasn't just a passive observer anymore. I was a player in this game, and I wasn't about to lose. Then it was time for the second part of my plan. Emily. I'd been holding off on confronting her. Part of me had hoped that somehow she would come to her senses, that she would realize the enormity of what she had done. But the longer I waited, the more I realized that wasn't going to happen. Emily was gone. She had made her choice, and there was no going back. So I decided to make her regret it. I called her one evening, pretending to be calm, collected. I knew if I showed any emotion, if I allowed her to see how deeply hurt I was, she would win.
I couldn't let that happen. I had to remain in control. "Hey, Em," I said when she picked up.
Her voice was hesitant, like she wasn't sure how to handle this conversation. I could feel her reluctance, her uncertainty about whether she should even pick up the phone. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook. "John," she said, sounding almost surprised. "What's this about?" "I need to talk to you," I said, my tone steady. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I need to make one thing clear." I could hear the faintest edge of panic in her voice. She knew what was coming. "I don't want you to think that I'm just going to let you walk away from this," I continued. "You don't get to betray me and then act like nothing happened. You don't get to walk away and pretend like I'll just move on." There was a pause, and then she sighed, as if she had already resigned herself to this conversation. "John, please, I don't think we need to do this. It's over. I've made my decision." I could feel my blood boil, but I bit my tongue. "No, Em, it's not over. Not for me." I was getting closer now, my plan taking shape. It wasn't about
winning her back. It wasn't about begging her to stay. I had stopped being that man the moment she walked out the door. No, this was about showing her that she couldn't just walk away without facing the consequences. She needed to know that.
She had broken me, but that I was rising from it.
"I don't expect you to understand what I'm feeling," I went on, my voice getting colder, harder. "But I'm not going to sit by and let you ruin everything we had. And I'm certainly not going to let Mark get away with what he's done there."
Was a long silence on the other end of the line. "John, I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice laced with disbelief. "You will," I said, my words heavy with the weight of everything I had been planning. "You'll see. You both will." I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need her to feel sorry. All I needed was for her to know that I was no longer the man she left behind. I had a plan, and it was already set into motion. The next step was to confront Mark. It was time to bring everything to the surface, to strip away the lies and expose the truth. But I wasn't going to do it in the way he expected. I was going to make him realize that I wasn't just some fool to be discarded. I wasn't the passive husband anymore. I was John, and I was ready for war. The days leading up to the confrontation were a blur. Each one passed in a haze of anger and anticipation. I had already planted the seeds of doubt in Mark's career, and Emily, well, she hadn't even realized that the life she thought she was escaping was the very one she had once built with me. But now it was time to bring it all together. It was time for the truth to come crashing down on both of them. I knew Emily wouldn't expect me to show up at her office. In fact, she probably thought I had moved on, that I had forgotten about everything. She would be wrong. It was a Friday morning when I decided to take action. I had spent the previous days tracking Mark's movements, finding out when he'd be in the office, when Emily would be working late, when the two of them might be vulnerable. I had even made sure the timing was perfect. If I was going to confront them, it had to be when they weren't expecting it, when they were least prepared to deal with the fallout. The plan was simple. I would walk into Emily's office and I would let them both see the result of my work. No more games, no more subtle manipulations. This was going to be direct, and it was going to hurt. I stood outside her office building, waiting for the right moment. My heart was racing, but there was a certain calm that washed over me, a certainty that what I was doing was necessary. Emily had taken everything from me, and now it was my turn to take something from her. And Mark, well, he had no idea what, was about to hit him. It wasn't long before I saw Mark's black car pull into the parking lot. He was walking toward the entrance, looking like he had it all together, smooth, confident, as always. But today, he was about to learn that things weren't always as perfect as they seemed. I followed him inside, watching him as he walked through the glass doors. He didn't see me, which only made the plan feel more satisfying. I waited until he entered the elevator before I slipped into the stairwell. I wasn't here to make a scene. I wasn't here to be noticed. I was here for something much bigger. It only took a few minutes to get to the right floor. I was moving fast now, my footsteps silent on the polished floor, my heart pounding in my chest. I had come this far, and there was no turning back. I was about to put everything on the line, my dignity, my marriage, my future, and I had no idea what would come out of this. I reached Emily's office door. She was sitting at her desk, typing away on her computer, completely unaware of the
storm about to hit. I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath.
It had to be now. I pushed the door open without knocking, my presence cutting through the quiet like a blade. Emily's head snapped up in surprise, her green eyes wide with shock as she saw me standing in the doorway. For a brief second, she didn't know what to say, and that in itself was enough. I had her attention. "What are you doing here, John?" she asked, her voice cold. The same way it had been the night she dropped the bombshell on me. But today there was something different about her. She looked smaller somehow, caught off guard. It wasn't the same confident woman who had walked out on me. No, this was a woman who was starting to realize that things were about to go horribly wrong. "Don't act surprised, Emily," I said, walking into the room. My voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. Something dangerous. "You knew this day would come." She stood up, her hand gripping the edge of the desk. "You need to leave," she said, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to
hide it. "This is a workplace. You can't just barge in here like this." I took a step forward. "This is exactly where I need to be. You think you can just toss me aside, and that's it? You think I'll just fade into the background while you and Mark—" I stopped myself before I said too much. "No, Emily, it doesn't work like that."
At that moment, the door opened behind me, and there he was, Mark. He looked every bit the arrogant, self-assured man I had come to despise. His eyes flicked between Emily and me, registering the tension in the room. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. He seemed more irritated than concerned, as if he couldn't fathom what had brought me here. That would change soon enough. I turned to face him, my eyes narrowing. "We need to talk, Mark,"
I said, my voice cold, laced with venom. About you, about your little affair with my wife." Mark's face went from confused to defensive in an instant. "What the hell are you talking about?" he spat. "This is none of your business." "It is now," I replied, taking another step toward him. "You're not going to get away with this. I know about everything. Your affair, your lies, how you've been playing both sides. But that's not the worst part. You see, you've already ruined my life, but now I'm going to make sure your perfect little world falls apart." Mark's face turned pale as I continued, the realization
dawning on him that his little game was over. "You think you can destroy me?" he asked, a tremor in his voice. "You don't know who you're dealing with," I laughed, low and dark. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Mark. You're a liar, a cheat, and a coward. And I'm not going to let you get away with it." Emily stood frozen, watching as the man she had chosen began to falter. I could see the doubt in her eyes now, the momentary flicker of regret that had been absent before. But it was too late for her. She had made her choice, and now she would have to face the consequences. Mark made a desperate move to step toward me, but I was faster. I grabbed him by the collar, shoving him back against the wall. "You'll never have her," I said, my voice shaking with rage, "and I will make sure the world knows exactly what you are. No one is going to trust you after I'm done." I released him, letting him stumble backward. His eyes were wide with panic now, the confidence he had worn like armor completely gone. Emily watched it all unfold, her face pale, her lips trembling as she realized the full extent of my fury. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about power. This was about taking back control of my life. And when it was all said and done, they would know that I wasn't a man to be trifled with. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them both behind. But as I did, I knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. The hours after that confrontation felt like an eternity. I didn't go back to my apartment right away. I needed space, time to clear my mind. I walked the streets aimlessly, my hands balled into fists, my chest tight with emotion. What had just happened? What did I hope to accomplish? It wasn't just about punishing Emily and Mark. No, it was bigger than that. It was about me reclaiming my life, about taking back my dignity, about showing myself that I wasn't the weak man I had once been. I didn't get an immediate answer to all these questions, but one thing was crystal clear. I was done being the victim. By the time I finally returned home, it was late in the evening. The house felt colder than usual. I hadn't been back here since Emily left. Every corner, every room still held memories of the life we had built. But that life was gone. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a tomb. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing through the silence. It was almost haunting, like the house itself was mourning what had been lost. But I wasn't here to grieve anymore. I was here to finish what I had started. As I passed the living room, I glanced at the framed photo of us, me, Emily, and the life we had built together. I had once looked at that photo and seen happiness. Now, all I saw was a lie. That picture wasn't us anymore. It was a reminder of how far I'd fallen, but it wasn't going to control me. No, I was in control now. The next day, I met with my lawyer. The divorce papers were already drawn up. Emily had made it clear that she didn't want to fight it. She didn't want me. She didn't want anything.
And that was fine by me. I had long stopped fighting for her. I signed the papers without hesitation. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just done. There was no more fight in me. I was finished with her, with Mark, with all the games they
Played. I was taking back my power, and it started with this moment. When I left the lawyer's office, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't free yet, but I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. The final chapter of my old life was closing, and the new one was beginning. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was going to be okay. But the hardest part of it all was still to come. The moment when I had to look Emily in the eye one last time and face the truth of what we had become, I called her that afternoon. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew it had to be done. I wanted closure. I needed it. "Emily," I said, when she answered, my voice steady, my heart pounding despite myself. "We need to talk." She hesitated before replying. "John?"
I don't think there's anything left to say. You're wrong, I said, trying to keep the emotion out of my voice. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. I've spent too long pretending that I wasn't hurt, pretending
"That I could just let you walk away without a word. But I won't let this end like that. I deserve more than that." There was a long pause. I could feel her eyes on me, even though we weren't together. It was as if she could feel the change in me, the new resolve in my voice. "You think I don't know that?" she said, her tone softer now, almost regretful. "I didn't want this, John. I didn't want to hurt you." I swallowed the lump in my throat, but I didn't let the pain show. "You did hurt me, Emily. You shattered everything we had. But you know what? I'm going to be okay. I'm going to move on." The silence stretched between us. I knew she didn't know what to say, but I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't need her to tell me she was sorry. That wasn't going to change anything. The damage had been done. "I've signed the divorce papers," I continued, my voice firm. "You'll be getting them soon. This is the end, Emily. There's no going back." I could hear her breath catch on the other end of the line. "I never wanted it to end like this," she whispered. "I never meant for it to be this way." I let out a long breath. "I know, Em, but it doesn't matter anymore. We've both made our choices, and now we have to live with them." Another long pause, then she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope you find happiness, John. I really do." "I will," I said, and I meant it. "I'm going to be okay." I hung up the phone without another word. There was nothing more to say. The last thread of my old life was gone, severed completely. I didn't feel a sense of triumph or victory. I just felt empty. But that emptiness wasn't a bad thing. It was freedom. As the days passed, I focused on rebuilding. I started seeing a therapist to help me navigate the emotional aftermath of the betrayal, and I threw myself into work. It wasn't easy. There were days when the memories would sneak up on me, when I would catch myself wondering what went wrong. But with each passing day, I grew stronger. I grew more certain of who I was. Eventually, Emily tried to reach out, but I ignored her calls. I didn't need her in my life anymore. She had made her choices, and now I was making mine. I never saw Mark again, at least not in person. The rumors about his affair with Emily began to surface, and the walls he had so carefully constructed around his reputation started to crumble. It was slow at first, but I knew it was only a matter of time before everything he had built came crashing down. And when it did, I would be watching from the sidelines, knowing that I had been the one to set the wheels in motion. Life had a funny way of working itself out, didn't it? In the end, I realized that the real revenge wasn't in destroying.
Emily or Mark. It was in surviving. It was in rebuilding from the ashes. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't the man who had been left behind. I was someone new, someone stronger, and that strength would carry me forward no matter what.